Staff Sergeant Maya Thompson sat alone at the corner of Murphy's Bar and Grill, her fingers wrapped around a glass of cold beer she had barely touched. The neon signs cast a soft glow across her dark skin, highlighting the exhaustion in her eyes after 18 months of deployment in Afghanistan. It was her first night out since returning home to the small town of Cedar Springs, Texas. The bar wasn't too crowded for a Friday night. Country music played softly in the background while the usual regulars shot pool and chatted among themselves. Maya had chosen this place because it was quiet, away from the roadier establishments near the military base. She just wanted a peaceful evening to decompress and adjust to civilian life again. A few patrons had nodded respectfully when they noticed her military ID on the counter as she ordered her drink. The bartender, an older man named Joe with graying hair and kind eyes, had even refused to let her pay. "Welcome home, soldier," he'd said with a genuine smile. It was moments like these that reminded her why she loved her country, despite its complicated history. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her mother, asking if she'd made it safely to the bar. At 32 years old, Maya was amused that her mother still worried about her like she was a teenager. This was the same woman who had raised her alone after her father passed away, working 2 jobs to ensure Maya could pursue her dreams. The same woman who had cried with pride when Maya graduated from basic training, and again when she was promoted to staff sergeant. As she typed a quick reply, Maya's mind wandered to the events of the past year and a half. The faces of the soldiers she treated as a combat medic flashed through her memory. Some she'd saved, others she couldn't. Her fingers unconsciously traced the scar on her left forearm, a reminder of the day their convoy had been hit by an IED. She continued treating the wounded even after being injured herself, an action that later earned her a Bronze Star. The door chimed as more customers entered the bar, but Maya barely noticed. She was lost in thought, remembering the training sessions she'd led for new recruits. As one of the few female martial arts instructors on base, she'd made it her mission to ensure every soldier under her command could defend themselves effectively. Her second Bronze Star had come from successfully defending her medical station during an enemy assault, using the very techniques she taught others. The bartender approached with another beer, pulling Maya from her thoughts. "Courtesy of the gentleman at the end of the bar," Joe said, gesturing toward a middle-aged man in a business suit who raised his glass in a respectful salute. Maya smiled and nodded in thanks, though she hadn't touched her first drink yet. She appreciated the gesture but wasn't in the mood for conversation. Looking around the bar, Maya observed the diverse mix of people. There were locals in working clothes, a few soldiers from the base, and what appeared to be traveling business people stopping for a drink before heading to their hotels. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly, exactly what she needed after spending so much time in high-stress situations. She checked her watch. 8:45 p.m. The night was still young, but Maya was considering heading home early. The transition back to civilian life was proving more challenging than she'd expected. Everything seemed different somehow, slower, quieter, less urgent. Part of her missed the adrenaline and sense of purpose that came with her deployment, though she'd never admit that to her worried mother. The sound of motorcycles rumbling in the parking lot caught her attention. Maya had grown up around bikes. Her father had been a motorcycle mechanic before he passed away. The familiar sound brought a small smile to her face, but it faded as she heard loud, boisterous voices approaching the entrance. Something in their tone made her instincts kick in, the same instincts that had kept her and her patients alive in the combat zone. As the door swung open, letting in a blast of cool evening air, Maya straightened slightly in her seat. Years of military training had taught her to be aware of her surroundings without appearing alert. She maintained her relaxed posture, but her senses were now fully engaged, cataloging every detail of the new arrivals. Her right hand instinctively moved closer to her phone as 5 large men in leather vests entered the bar, their loud voices already disrupting the peaceful atmosphere. Little did Maya know, this quiet evening was about to become anything but peaceful. The 5 bikers made their presence known immediately, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor as they made their way to the bar. They were all large men, covered in tattoos and wearing leather vests with patches that identified them as members of a local motorcycle club. The leader, a tall man with a graying beard and a prominent skull tattoo on his neck, spotted Maya almost instantly. Well, what do we have here?" he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, nudging one of his companions. The other bikers turned to look, their expressions changing from curiosity to something darker. The peaceful atmosphere in the bar shifted, becoming thick with tension. Joe, the bartender, seemed to sense trouble brewing. He moved closer to where the bikers were gathering, wiping the same spot on the counter repeatedly while keeping a watchful eye on the situation. A few regular customers quietly settled their tabs and left, not wanting to be around for whatever was about to unfold. The leader ordered beers for his group, then deliberately moved to stand just a few feet from Maya's table. His friends spread out behind him, creating a half circle that partially blocked her from view of the other customers. Their body language was intimidating, a tactic Maya had seen many times before in different contexts. "Ain't this supposed to be a respectable establishment?" One of the bikers called out, his words slightly slurred despite having just arrived. "Since when do they let just anybody in here?" His companions laughed, the sound harsh and mean-spirited. Maya remained still, her military training kicking in. She assessed each man carefully while appearing to focus on her phone. The leader was about 6'2", probably around 240 pounds. Two of his friends were smaller but wiry, likely more agile. The remaining two were heavyset, their movements suggesting they relied more on strength than speed. "Hey, darling, I'm talking to you," the leader said, taking another step closer. His breath reeked of cigarettes and earlier drinks, suggesting they'd been bar hopping. "Don't you know it's rude to ignore people?" Joe's voice cut through the tension. "Gentlemen, everyone's welcome here. How about you find seats at the other end of the bar?" His suggestion was met with mocking laughter. "We're just being friendly," one of the wiry bikers said, pulling up a chair uninvited at Maya's table. He sat backwards on it, resting his arms on the backrest. "Teaching some manners to folks who don't know their place." Maya's phone buzzed again, another text from her mother. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a combat veteran who had faced enemy fire and saved countless lives, being harassed at a local bar while her mother checked to make sure she was safe. The leader took another step forward, intentionally bumping the table and causing Maya's beer to spill. The amber liquid spread across the table and dripped onto her jacket, her father's old leather jacket that she'd kept all these years. "Oops," he said with fake concern. "Looks like you had an accident. Maybe you should head home and clean yourself up." His friends snickered, emboldened by their leader's behavior. Other patrons in the bar watched nervously. A young couple near the pool table whispered to each other, the man reaching for his phone. Maya noticed this but kept her attention on the immediate threat. She could hear more motorcycles pulling up outside, probably more members of their club arriving. "What's that on the counter?" one of the bikers asked, spotting her military ID. He reached for it, but Maya was faster, smoothly sliding it into her pocket. This motion seemed to anger them further. "Playing soldier too?" the leader sneered. "What's this world coming to?" He leaned down, placing both hands on her table, his face inches from hers. "Listen here." Maya finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. Something in her eyes made him pause mid-sentence. The steady, calculating look of someone who had seen real combat, who had made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. For a moment, just a moment, uncertainty flickered across the leader's face. But then one of his friends shoved Maya's chair from behind, and all hell was about to break loose in Murphy's Bar and Grill. The chair rocked forward from the shove, but Maya moved with it smoothly, using the momentum to stand up in one fluid motion. Her full height of 6 feet became apparent as she rose, her athletic frame evident even under the leather jacket. The movement was so controlled and precise that it momentarily caught the bikers off guard. "You really don't want to do this," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to commanding others. It was the same tone she'd used countless times in combat situations, when keeping people level-headed meant the difference between survival and disaster. The leader recovered from his brief surprise and laughed, though it sounded forced. "Oh, look who finally found her voice. And what exactly don't we want to do, sweetheart?" He reached out to grab her arm, his large hand aiming to grip her bicep. Maya didn't move. Instead, she spoke again, even more quietly than before. "That's my father's jacket you just spilled beer on. He was a Marine. Taught me everything I know about respect before he passed." Her eyes never left the leader's face. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away." The statement hung in the air for a moment. Joe the bartender had his phone out now, though whether he was calling the police or recording wasn't clear. The remaining customers had backed away, creating a clear space around Maya's table. "Your daddy ain't here now, is he?" One of the wiry bikers sneered, stepping closer. "And neither is your little army to back you up." He made a show of looking around the bar. "Just you and us." The leader's hand finally made contact with Maya's arm, his fingers tightening around her bicep. "Maybe we should teach you some." He never finished the sentence. In the time it took him to blink, Maya had shifted her weight slightly, and suddenly the biker leader found himself staring at the ceiling, his back flat against the floor, the wind knocked out of him. He hadn't even felt himself fall. The bar erupted into chaos. Two of the bikers lunged forward simultaneously, while the others reached for weapons in their pockets. Maya's training kicked in automatically, the same training that had kept her alive during firefights and ambushes. She stepped inside the first attacker's reach, using his own momentum to send him crashing into his friend. Both men stumbled, knocking over several chairs. The leader was still on the ground, gasping for air, trying to understand what had happened. The fourth biker pulled out a knife, its blade catching the neon light. Maya's expression didn't change. She disarmed insurgents with far deadlier weapons. She waited, perfectly still, as he charged forward with a roar of anger. What happened next was so fast that most observers would later give conflicting accounts. The knife-wielding biker suddenly found himself face down on a table, his weapon clattering harmlessly to the floor, his arm twisted behind him at an angle that promised significant pain if he moved. "I don't want to hurt you," Maya said to him, her voice still eerily calm, "but I will if I have to." The man whimpered in response, all his earlier bravado gone. The fifth biker, seeing his friends taken down so easily, backed away toward the door. The leader had managed to get to his knees, his face red with a mixture of pain and humiliation. The two who had collided were untangling themselves, looking far less confident than they had minutes ago. Joe's voice cut through the tension. "Police are on their way, folks. Might want to think carefully about your next move." He had indeed been calling the authorities, though the entire incident had lasted less than a minute. Maya released the man on the table, stepping back to give him space to stand. Her posture remained ready but not aggressive, her breathing steady and controlled. Years of combat experience had taught her that the aftermath of a confrontation can be just as dangerous as the fight itself. The leader struggled to his feet, his earlier arrogance replaced by confusion and fear. He looked at Maya differently now, seeing not just a woman alone at a bar, but a trained warrior who had systematically dismantled his group's attempt at intimidation. "Who? What are you?" he managed to ask, rubbing his back where he had hit the floor. Maya straightened her father's jacket, brushing off the spilled beer. The sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance, growing closer. The night was far from over, and she knew things were about to get even more interesting. The sound of sirens grew louder as two police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their red and blue lights flashing through the bar's windows. Maya remained perfectly still, her military training evident in her calm demeanor despite the chaos around her. The bikers, still nursing their wounded pride and various aches, shuffled nervously. 3 officers entered Murphy's Bar and Grill, led by a veteran sergeant named Mike Williams. He took in the scene, overturned chairs, spilled drinks, 5 disheveled bikers, and 1 composed woman in a leather jacket, standing in the middle of it all. "Evening, folks," Sergeant Williams said, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" His eyes scanned the room, noting Joe behind the bar with his phone still recording, and the scattered patrons pressed against the walls. The biker leader, still struggling to regain his dignity, pointed at Maya. "She attacked us. We were just having a friendly conversation, and she went crazy." His voice cracked slightly, undermining his attempt at outrage. Joe immediately stepped forward. "Got it all on video, Sergeant. These men were harassing the lady. She defended herself after they got physical." He held up his phone as evidence. "And I got security cameras covering every angle." Sergeant Williams nodded, having dealt with similar situations before. "Ma'am," he addressed Maya, "could I see some identification, please?" Maya reached slowly into her pocket and produced her military ID. The sergeant's eyebrows rose slightly as he read it. "Staff Sergeant Thompson, combat medic." A look of recognition crossed his face. "Wait, aren't you the one who saved that entire platoon during the ambush last year?" The bikers' expressions changed as they began to realize exactly who they had tried to intimidate. Maya nodded modestly. Just doing my job, sir. Like tonight. I used minimum force to defend myself when these gentlemen became aggressive. One of the younger officers was already reviewing the security footage with Joe, while his partner took statements from other customers. The video clearly showed the bikers surrounding Maya, the deliberate beer spilling, and their subsequent aggression. Seems pretty clear-cut to me, Sergeant Williams said, turning to the biker leader. You want to press charges, knowing this video will be evidence. The leader quickly shook his head, suddenly finding the floor very interesting. How about you, Staff Sergeant? The police sergeant asked. Would you like to press charges? Maya looked at the bikers, who now seemed much smaller than they had minutes ago. No, sir, she replied. I think they've learned something tonight. That's enough for me. The leader of the bikers, his face red with shame, finally spoke up. Look, he stammered, then straightened up. We were wrong. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The apology seemed to physically pain him, but it was genuine. Sergeant Williams nodded approvingly. Right then, gentlemen, I suggest you head home. And maybe think twice before judging someone by their appearance next time. He turned to Maya. Staff Sergeant, would you like an escort home? No thank you, sir. I can manage, Maya replied with a small smile. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She had proven more than capable of handling herself. As the bikers filed out, followed by two of the officers, the remaining customers burst into applause. Joe approached with a fresh beer and a clean towel for her jacket. On the house, he said with a grin. Your father would have been proud. Sergeant Williams lingered for a moment. You know, he said thoughtfully, we could use someone with your skills at the department. We offer training sessions for our officers in hand-to-hand combat, if you're interested. Maya considered this as she carefully cleaned her father's jacket. The night had turned out differently than she planned, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Her mother would probably have a heart attack when she heard about it, but then again, her mother had always said everything happens for a reason. The sergeant left his card on her table before leaving, and the bar gradually returned to normal. Maya finally took a sip of her fresh beer, allowing herself to relax. In Afghanistan, she'd learned that sometimes the best victories were the ones that ended with understanding rather than destruction. Little did she know, this incident would have far-reaching consequences that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others in unexpected ways. By the next morning, the video of Maya's self-defense display had gone viral. Joe's phone recording, combined with the bar's security footage, had made its way onto social media platforms. The clips showed the incident from multiple angles, and viewers were particularly impressed by how efficiently she had neutralized the threats without causing serious injury. Maya discovered this when she woke up to dozens of missed calls and messages. Her mother's frantic voice was the first she heard when she checked her voicemail. Maya Thompson, why am I watching my daughter throw grown men around on Facebook? Call me immediately. As she sipped her morning coffee, Maya scrolled through various news sites that had already picked up the story. Headlines ranged from female soldier shows amazing restraint against harassers to combat medic teaches bikers unforgettable lesson. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from old army buddies who had recognized her in the footage. Around noon, there was a knock at her door. Maya opened it to find a man in his 60s wearing a leather vest similar to the ones from the previous night, but with different patches. He introduced himself as Roger Martinez, the president of the largest legitimate motorcycle club in the state. Staff Sergeant Thompson, he said respectfully, I came to personally apologize for what happened last night. Those men weren't part of our club, but their actions reflect badly on all bikers. My own daughter serves in the Air Force, and I was disgusted by their behavior. Maya invited him in for coffee, and they had a long conversation about military service, respect, and the importance of breaking down prejudices. Roger shared stories about his own time in Vietnam and the discrimination he had faced as a Hispanic veteran. Those young men need guidance, Roger said, shaking his head. They're part of a small breakaway group that's been causing trouble. But after last night's video went viral, they're learning some hard lessons about respect. As they talked, Maya's phone kept buzzing. Local news stations wanted interviews, veterans groups were reaching out for speaking engagements, and even a few martial arts schools had contacted her about teaching self-defense classes. The most surprising call came from the police department. Sergeant Williams had shown the security footage during a morning briefing, and the chief was impressed by Maya's control and technique. They wanted to discuss the possibility of her developing a training program for female officers. Your father would be proud, her mother said when Maya finally called her back, though he probably wouldn't have been as gentle with those thugs. There was a pause. Just promise me you'll be careful, baby. Not everyone who sees that video will have good intentions. Her mother's words proved prophetic when Maya checked her email. Among the supportive messages were a few threatening ones from people angry about her, making those men look bad. She forwarded these to Sergeant Williams, who assured her they would investigate. By late afternoon, the biker leader from the previous night had made a public statement on social media. He admitted his wrongdoing and apologized not just to Maya, but to all service members and women who had faced similar harassment. The post was accompanied by a photo of him and his crew at a local VA hospital where they had spent the day volunteering. Maya sat on her couch, overwhelmed by how quickly everything had escalated. Her phone lit up with another notification, this time from a national morning show wanting to interview her about women in combat roles and self-defense. The producer mentioned they'd already received hundreds of requests from viewers wanting to hear her story. A text message came through from Joe at the bar. You got a free drink waiting whenever you want it. Though I doubt anyone will bother you again, you're basically a legend now. Maya smiled, thinking about how differently the situation could have ended if she'd chosen to respond with anger instead of controlled skill. Her military training had taught her that true strength often lies in showing restraint, and last night had proven that lesson true once again. As the sun set on this unexpectedly eventful day, Maya realized that what had started as an unpleasant confrontation was turning into an opportunity to make real change. Sometimes, she thought, the best way to fight prejudice isn't with fists or angry words, but by demonstrating dignity and skill in the face of ignorance. 3 days after the incident, Maya found herself sitting in a television studio, adjusting her dress uniform while the makeup artist added final touches. The national morning show Dawn America had flown her to New York for a live interview. As she waited in the green room, she watched the viral video play on multiple screens. It had now reached over 20 million views. 5 minutes, Staff Sergeant Thompson, a young producer, called out, clipboard in hand. Maya nodded, remembering similar moments of anticipation before combat missions. Somehow, this made her more nervous. The show's hosts, Sarah Chen and Mark Roberts, welcomed her warmly when she walked onto the set. The studio audience burst into applause, with several military veterans in uniform standing to salute her. Maya returned their salutes sharply, her training taking over. Staff Sergeant Thompson, Sarah began, the video we've all seen shows incredible restraint and skill, but what many viewers don't know is your full military background. Could you share some of that with us? Maya spoke about her 12 years of service, including 3 combat tours. She described the ambush where she'd earned her first Bronze Star, treating wounded soldiers under heavy fire. The audience sat in respectful silence as she recounted pulling 2 injured Marines to safety while wounded herself. And you're also a martial arts instructor for the military, Mark added. How did that training help you handle the situation at the bar? The most important lesson we teach, Maya explained, isn't about fighting, it's about control. Every movement in that video was designed to neutralize the threat without causing permanent harm. These are the same techniques we teach soldiers to use when they need to subdue someone without causing injury. The interview took an unexpected turn when Sarah announced they had a surprise guest. The studio door opened, and Roger Martinez walked in, accompanied by 3 of the bikers from the bar incident. The audience gasped, but Maya remained calm, watching as they approached with obvious nervousness. The biker leader, who introduced himself as Frank Davidson, spoke directly to the camera. I want to apologize again, not just to Staff Sergeant Thompson, but to everyone watching. Our behavior that night represented everything that's wrong with how some people treat others. Since then, we've been working with Mr. Martinez's motorcycle club to learn about respect, diversity, and giving back to our community. Roger explained how the incident had sparked a new program within his motorcycle club, partnering with local veterans organizations to combat prejudice and support military families. The 3 bikers had already completed their first weekend of volunteer work at the VA hospital. Staff Sergeant Thompson, Frank said, his voice cracking slightly, would you be willing to help us with this program? We could really use someone with your experience and patience. He managed a small smile at the last word. The audience held their breath, waiting for Maya's response. She thought about her father, who had always taught her that change was possible if people were willing to learn. Yes, she said simply. I'll help. The studio erupted in applause. Sarah wiped away tears as she announced that their network would be donating $50,000 to support the new program. Mark revealed that several martial arts equipment companies have pledged to provide free training gear for veterans. After the show, Maya found herself surrounded by viewers wanting to shake her hand or take photos. A young girl, maybe 12 years old, pushed through the crowd with her mother. I want to be just like you when I grow up, the girl declared, her eyes shining. My brother says girls can't be strong, but she showed him. Maya knelt down to the girl's level. Being strong isn't about muscles, she said quietly. It's about knowing when to use them and when not to. Remember that. As she headed to the airport later that day, Maya reflected on how a simple night out had turned into something much bigger. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sergeant Williams. The police department's training program was approved, and they wanted her to start next month. Another message popped up, this one from Joe at the bar. Your story just hit international news. Got some Australian tourists here who came just to see where it happened. Think you started something big, Staff Sergeant? Maya smiled, thinking about all the changes that had come from that one night. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from winning fights, but from showing others a better way to handle conflict. Her father had taught her that, and now she was teaching it to others. 6 months after the bar incident, Maya stood at attention in full-dress uniform on the steps of the state capitol. The governor was preparing to sign a bill that would establish veteran-led community programs across the state, inspired by what had become known as the Thompson Method. The ceremony brought together all the people who had been part of this unexpected journey. Joe from the bar stood proudly with his phone, still recording everything as he had that first night. The bikers, now wearing patches identifying them as program instructors, lined up in their newly pressed uniforms. Sergeant Williams and his officers represented the police department, while Roger Martinez had brought dozens of motorcycle club members who now served as mentors. What began as an unfortunate incident in a local bar, the governor announced, has transformed into a model program for communities nationwide. Staff Sergeant Thompson showed us that the skills that protect us in combat can also heal our communities at home. Maya's mother sat in the front row, dabbing tears from her eyes. Next to her was the young girl from the TV studio, who had become one of the program's youngest and most enthusiastic students. Behind them sat veterans from across the state, many of whom now ran similar programs in their own communities. After the ceremony, Maya led everyone to the newly completed Thompson Community Center. The modern facility featured training areas, counseling rooms, and a wall of photos showing the program's journey. The viral video played on a loop near the entrance, now serving as a reminder of how change can start with a single moment of choice. Frank, the former biker leader, gave tours to visitors, pointing out how the center served different community needs. 6 months ago, I was filled with hatred, he told them. Staff Sergeant Thompson could have responded to that hatred with violence. Instead, she showed me a better way. The afternoon's highlight was a demonstration by program graduates. Police officers worked alongside reformed troublemakers, showing how the Thompson method emphasized de-escalation and mutual respect. Veterans shared how teaching these skills had helped them find new purpose after military service. Maya watched from the side as her students demonstrated their skills. The mother and father from Ohio stood next to her. They had moved to town to help run the program's family support services. Their son, now recovered, taught workshops for wounded warriors. Did you ever imagine that night would lead to all this? Joe asked, still filming as always. Maya smiled, thinking about the path that had brought them here. Her father's jacket, with its new patch, hung in a display case near the center's entrance. Below it was a simple plaque with his favorite saying, "True strength lies not in what we can do to others, but in what we can do for others." The Pentagon had adopted elements of the Thompson method for military training. Police departments across the country sent officers to learn the program, but more importantly, communities were healing. Former adversaries now worked together, and people who once feared each other now trained side by side. As the day drew to a close, Maya gathered everyone in the main training area. Students, teachers, police officers, bikers, veterans, and community members stood together on the mats. She looked at their faces. Each person had their own story of transformation. 6 months ago, Maya began. We were strangers, some of us even enemies. Today we're family. Remember, it's not about who's strongest or toughest. It's about being strong enough to help others become better. The group bowed together, a gesture that now meant more than just martial arts respect. It represented the bonds they had built, the changes they had made, and the community they had become. Later that evening, as Maya locked up the center, she found a new photo someone had added to the wall. It showed her sitting at the bar that first night, unaware of what was about to unfold. Next to it was a recent picture of the same bar, now a popular spot where people from all walks of life gathered peacefully. She touched her father's dog tags under her shirt and smiled. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning fights, but from transforming them into something better. What had started as a potential tragedy had become a legacy of healing and hope, proving that the strongest defense isn't in our fists, but in our ability to change hearts and minds. Maya turned off the lights and stepped outside into the evening air, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to make a difference, one lesson at a time. 1 month after the bar incident, Maya stood in front of a packed community center gymnasium. The space had been converted into a training area with mats covering the floor and motivational posters on the walls. Before her stood an unlikely mix of students, police officers, veterans, former troublemakers including the bikers from the bar, and women of all ages who wanted to learn self-defense. Self-defense isn't about hurting others, Maya explained, pacing the front of the room. It's about protecting yourself while giving your opponent a chance to rethink their choices. She gestured to Frank, the former biker leader, who now served as her assistant instructor. Frank stepped forward, his leather vest replaced by a training uniform. "A month ago, I was the kind of person you needed to defend yourself against," he admitted to the class. "Staff Sergeant Thompson could have seriously hurt me that night. Instead, she taught me a lesson I'll never forget." The training session was being filmed for a documentary about community transformation. News of Maya's program had spread, and similar initiatives were starting in other cities. Veterans groups across the country were reaching out, wanting to replicate her combination of self-defense training and community outreach. During a water break, Maya checked her phone to find a message from the Pentagon. They were interested in incorporating her approach into their standard training programs. Another message came from a senior senator who wanted to discuss legislation about veteran-led community programs. "Staff Sergeant," called a voice from the door. It was Roger Martinez, accompanied by two unexpected visitors, the parents of one of the soldiers Maya had saved during the ambush in Afghanistan. They had driven from Ohio after seeing her on television, wanting to thank her in person. The mother rushed forward to hug Maya, tears in her eyes. "Our son told us how you carried him to safety while you were bleeding yourself," she said. "And now here you are, still protecting people." The father, a Vietnam veteran, added proudly, "When I saw that video, I knew it had to be you. Saying cool head under pressure that saved my boy's life." Maya introduced them to the class, and their story added a powerful dimension to the day's lessons. The students listened intently as the parents described how Maya's battlefield courage had given them more years with their son. Later that afternoon, Maya received another surprise visit. Sergeant Williams arrived with the police chief and the mayor. They had a proposal. They wanted to establish a permanent training center, with Maya as the lead instructor. The program would combine veteran support, community outreach, and public safety training. "What you've started here goes beyond self-defense," the mayor explained. "You're building bridges between different parts of our community that never used to talk to each other." The chief handed Maya a folder containing the proposal. The city council voted unanimously to fund it. We'd already had other cities asking about establishing similar programs. As Maya reviewed the documents, she noticed Joe from the bar standing in the doorway, grinning. "Brought you something," he said, producing her father's leather jacket, now professionally cleaned and restored. The motorcycle club took up a collection to have it fixed. They added something too, if you don't mind. On the sleeve was a small new patch, a medical insignia combined with a martial arts symbol, with the words, "Strength through understanding" underneath. The design had been created by the same bikers who had harassed her that night. now transformed into some of her most dedicated supporters. Maya ran her fingers over the patch, thinking about how her father would have appreciated its meaning. The jacket now told an even richer story, not just of her father's service, but of how one night's conflict had evolved into something that was changing lives. As the day's training session ended, Maya watched her diverse group of students bow to each other respectfully before leaving the mats. Former adversaries were now training partners, learning from each other's experiences and perspectives. The documentary crew captured these moments, but they couldn't quite capture what Maya felt as she looked around the gymnasium. This was more than a self-defense class or a community program. It was proof that sometimes the best way to fight darkness is not with more darkness, but with understanding and opportunity for change. Her phone buzzed again, another message from her mother. Your father would be so proud of what you built. You're not just teaching people to defend themselves, you're teaching them to be better.